make sure I give you the right one.
Yeah.
How's Maria? Hi. I said, how's Maria? And you said,
Wait, you or the, wait, which,
okay.
Oh, we was wondering about that.
well, that was soon.
Yeah, it's next Thursday.
Next Thursday, and then you are next Saturday, the 30th?
At noon.
Yeah. Oh, is that noon now?
We meet you.
Oh, thank you.
It's moved up to 11:30. Not that you specifically, but people in general are like, oh yeah, it's at noon. So you show there from 1 to 5 and doors are closed and they sneak in during the first few. He's like,
Yeah, I remember doing that. It's like, I was late, I had a softball, so I'm like, you fuck.
Can I have your attention for a
Forever late,
second?
I knew it.
This is old business by now, you folks are veterans. But I have put in the music office on the desk that you see it go in, an envelope with Mr. Radcliffe's name on it. Please, after all is completed tomorrow, fill out the evaluation and put it in the appropriate envelope. I would appreciate that greatly.
Walter, is the email packet from the guy from Monday still in there?
Yeah. Candidates, just to let you know, candidates that want his envelope is still there, will be there until all the envelopes will be there until the end of it all, basically.
So just have another.
that's what I was okay. It's like one last thing.
I thought of making you a question. Hey, where's Grant? He's over there. Uh-huh. Really? You got it. Yeah. He was 15 minutes late for my lesson on Tuesday, so I left. And he was 15 minutes late for my lesson today. He was really bad. Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
It is my great pleasure to introduce our candidate number 2, Mr. Stephen Radcliffe, who is A.B. Dean of Musicology at Brandeis, and he will be defending that dissertation this coming summer. So once he is done conferring with Dr. Van Boer, we are ready to go.
Getting some final pointers. Hi.
All yours.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm an orchestra conductor, but I love doing opera. And the hardest thing about opera are not the lyric sections where the orchestra goes boom, chup, chup when the singer sings, but it's always, and for those of you who have played opera know, it's always the recitatives. The recitatives where the singers are very free, and the orchestra has punctuated accompaniments or little melodic interjections. Time stops, time starts. There's a great deal of flexibility, a huge variety of things going on in the recitative sections. And people haven't really spent very much time researching the recitatives. So for those of you who know me as an orchestra conductor, you might also know that I'm working on finishing a dissertation in musicology and music history, and working on a dissertation that has to do with the recitatives and the scenas, which are types of recitatives in the early operas of Giuseppe Verdi, one of my favorite composers, who celebrated his 200th anniversary this year, 1813. Verdi was preceded by Gioacchino Rossini, and this is sort of an amazing period in opera history from the transition of these 100 years. There's a bug on the climbing down Verdi's face there. And my name of my production is, let's see if this works. Oh, I'm going to have to be over here then. My presentation is Joe Green, Code Breaker. No, he is not a Navajo Indian. He did not work in the Second World War to decipher the Nazi codes. But instead, the code that Joe Green, Giuseppe Verdi, was working on deciphering was what is known as the Code Rossini. Here's Mr. Rossini. He's got una voce poco fa, I think, over there, and he's typing it out on his Morse code. And Code Rossini, the Rossini code is not Morse code, and neither is it. Neither is it the book by Dan Brown. And for those of you who have friends that are graphic designers here at school, I've seen a lot of wonderful senior recital posters. So it's always very helpful to have a graphic designer friend out of work sleeping on your couch because you can get them to do just about anything. The Rossini code is a form or a variety of forms Gioacchino Rossini, in his many operas in his career, developed. And these became, fortunately or unfortunately, quite codified in the period after Rossini. Rossini retired fairly young and lived up a lot of his life after composing great operas, retiring in the 1840s, 1850s. And this code was so prevalent. Why was it prevalent? Because the audience expected this code, they expected this formal structure, and we'll talk about it in a second. The singers of the opera expected it as well and had developed their careers based on the qualities inherent in its structure. The impresarios, the guys that were paying for the operas to be created, expected this as well. So this is one aspect of the code. This is the aria form that Rossini evolved. And of course, Rossini didn't know he was writing a code. It was all for us later on to decipher that this was actually a code where we see so many great similarities. But fundamental to it is, just looking now at this section here, the recitative we're going to talk about quite a bit, but the tempo primo, or the cantabile, is the moment in which the singer, well, let's talk about the recitative. The recitative has, its poetry is mixed verse. In other words, it doesn't rhyme. It's not set in quatrains. They're generally long strings of 7 and 11 syllables that, it's prose. It would be the equivalent of what we would call prose. So when we move from the recitative to the tempo primo, the cantabile, the prose turns to poetry. And we'll look at this in a second. The stanzas are set up in quatrains, groups of 4 lines. Each of the lines have the same amount of syllables. There is a rhyme scheme to it. If we look at the drama in the recitative, it's informative, it's active, it's talking about things that are happening right now. When we move to the lyric section, it is internal. It's as if in the theater there's a stop action. The moment stops and we are actually listening to the sound of the singer singing. The music in the recitative is unstable. It's irregular phrases, meter, harmony. I call it recitative texture, in which maybe there's just a chord. The singer will sing some information, and then there's maybe a chorale setting, maybe there's a little bit of rhythmic activity, but generally it's very asymmetrical, kind of disjunct, highly variegated. That changes when the cantabile begins. We become stable, regular phrase structure, a regulated meter, a regulated harmony. The second big movement in Rossini's code is something called the tempo di mezzo, or the middle movement. Here, once again, a new character will enter. After we've had the lyrical singer talking about inner feelings, that inner feeling moment, that reflection might be interrupted by a new character and a new development or a new idea. So once again, the poetry shifts back to mixed verse, the drama becomes active and informative, the music once again unstable. And then the final movement is the cavaletta, when, after this new information has taken place, the singer is resolved or has a new mood or a new idea, and is now singing generally in a very fast tempo, very quadratic, as I call it, very stable, very regular phrases. This cavaletta is almost always, in the time of Rossini, repeated with the same text. There's generally a couple stanzas that are repeated. And the second time that text is, does anybody know? Or the music, it becomes highly ornamented. This is when the singer will take the wild, crazy liberties with the vocal line. So this is kind of the structure of the conventional aria form that became so prevalent in the time of Rossini. And this is the structure that Verdi inherited. And you see I have my little brain icon, brain, heart. And it's easy to imagine this, Tobin Schindler, I haven't seen you for so long. Hi, how are you? Good to meet you. The recitative. Then I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the worst cellist I've ever heard in my life. He could never play in tune, and he was impossible to deal with in orchestra. Oh, now John comes in and says, Tobin's really been working on his octaves, and then we have the tempo di mezzo, and we have a little discussion, and then the cavaletta is, oh my goodness, Tobin is going to be the concertmaster of my orchestra again, and we'll have the opportunity to work together. So you understand the idea of interior, exterior, and if we were in a class, we would perhaps have the opportunity to write some little opera arias based on this type of structure. The duet structure is similar. There's one more movement inserted here. It's called the tempo di attacco, which is, the one thing about it is informative, but it is also in lyric verse. So, and we may get to some of that today, but other than that, it has the same basic structure. So One of the great theorists of the time, Carlo Ritorni, wrote, in the time, this is in the 1840s, about the time of early Verdi operas, the arias are like gems joined together in like a piece of jewelry, and the metal which joins them is the recitative. They are by nature such different things that one must be careful not to dress the one in the attributes of the other, and to ensure that a clear line separates them. So only lyric music, only regular verse poetry. Then we can have mixed verse poetry to chain the lyric sections together. This was a theorist writing at the time and observing what was happening in the opera houses of Paris and Italy. And the one thing about the Convenzione is that, as we'll see, the internal movements, it's very clear, their delineation. They're generally separated by a double bar. You're going to see a key change. There's generally a new tempo. There's often a different meter. There will be a different accompanimental pattern and a texture. It's generally preceded, almost always preceded by a full or half pace and real closure. Okay, we're ending one section, now we're going to begin another section. And all of these elements are aligned, and in particular they're aligned with the shift of poetic meter that we talked about, from mixed irregular verse to regular lyric verse. The result is a highly, really sectionalized formal plan. So going way, way down into the granular aspects, of course we have phrases and things like that, but we have these four movements that we looked at. Then the movements combine to be set pieces. In other words, aria, or finale, or duet, or trio. The set pieces combine into acts. The acts then, make up the opera. So what I wanted to do is to look at one of these here and just see if it's true. This is an opera of the I Due Foscari by Giuseppe Verdi, one of his earlier operas. And so we have a recitative here, which we'll go back to because there's some very cool things here. But you can see that we have a fermata, we have a cadence to F major here. Then there's a line here, and then there's this weird G flat major. Then there's an ascending line, and then we have an E flat minor chord, which inexplicably I just noticed this today. I must have gone back analyzing even B flat. So we're looking as if it's going to go 5 of B flat, another fermata, and then we have a regulated key change, right? We have a meter change, we have a vamp, boom, 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 and now we have the beginning of the cantabile section. You see very clear 4-bar phrases broken up into 2-bar segments, ending here in a half cadence, and then we have a little modulation to the dominant for a contrasting period. Once again, still pretty regulated phrase structure, and I'm assuming we all can kind of quickly visualize that. A return now here to D flat, and hanging on the dominant. Another thing, repeat of this section, resolution back to D flat again, and a final soaring version of the original theme with a big cadence here, 1-5-1-5, D flat 5-1-1-1, D flat major. And now what would we expect to see? The tempo di mezzo, right? The middle movement. This would be where another person comes in and we become more prosaic, right? Well, sure enough, here we have a double bar. We had a big, perfect authentic cadence. We go back to common time to 4/4, a new tempo, right? We have B flat minor, and we'll look at the text in a second. But what's happening here is this is Jacopo, and he is in a. I should have given you the background of this. He's in a prison cell in Venice, and he's looking out at Venice. He's been in exile for a long time. They're bringing him back to put him on trial, and this is the guard coming in to say that the council will now see you after he's had his beautiful moment of imagining the beautiful Venetian lagoons that he can see out his prison cell window, and talking about how much he loves Venice and how loyal he is to it. Now the guy comes in, gives him new information, which would be like John telling me that Tobin is really good cellist. And we have a little something gets going here. B flat minor is pretty static. Chromatic ascent here. A break. We have different things going on. It's not quite as regular. The point is that it's quite a bit less regular, less of a regulated phrase structure. We have a little bit of an interesting chromatic aspect to it. The F going to F flat, and then big 6/4 here. and then a E flat, 5 of A flat, right? And here we go. So basically it's a modulation from B flat minor to what would be next in our structure? Cabaletta. Allegro vivo, fast tempo, a 2-bar orchestral vamp, and the beginning of a big climactic, very regulated 4-bar phrase structures throughout this. And, oops, I just went backwards. Sorry. That could be confusing. Yes, and so this is the cabaletta, and if we just look, just as a sidebar, just so it's quite clear, just look at this odio solo et odio atroce. And he's talking about how horrible the people in the council are, and this is very much venting rage going on here. And so we continue that, and you'll notice that here after a big thing, we do it again, right? This is often the case. Now this version, the second version of the cabaletta, will be highly ornamented. And this is one of the things about the Claude Rossini. The singers really expected this cabaletta because they were like athletes, throwing their javelins or doing the 50-yard dash, or showing off how virtuosic they were with the coloratura parts, with fast runs and so on. So this whole thing would be completed and we cadence in A flat. So is that structure kind of clear? I mean, that example. And here's the text to it right here. And you'll see that this section here, that was the recitative, is all in mixed meters. It's really hard to see a really good rhyme in that. And then here the poet in the libretto will show you, this is my purple prose here. You begin to see in lyric verse the breaking down into quatrains, into things that are quite compact. And if you look at this, I have to use my hands to count. This is ottenario rather. So it's if we can all sort of count out odio solo ed odio atroce, 8 syllables, right? In quell'anime si sera, 8. Sanguinoso renda guerra, 8. Good, so far so good. Da costor si farà. Now that one's only 7, but that's normal in the classic rhyme scheme of the Italian poets of the time. This is ottenario. This would be a piano ending, which is boomchak. So the accent is on the penultimate syllable, but always in the last one of the quatrain, you're going to find a single, the accent on the very last one. So he's going to leave out one of the syllables. Ma se foscari una voce. You notice I have to make the elision in the I to the U. Va tuo non domi nel core. Good, we're at 8. Forza contra il loro rigor. Forza contra il loro rigore. Oh, that one's got 9. Okay, not the best poetry, but l'innocenza ti darà, 7. I know this would be rigore, I would assume, right? Do we have an Italian speaker here? Contro il loro rigore. Yeah. Sometimes the poets are not as good, and Verdi would write them often. But you can see the A, B, B, C. I know, I love doing my fingers. But you can see it really, voce, core, rigore, darà. You can see esilio, desio, rapido, mio. So you can see the internal A, B, B, C rhyme scheme here. So everything is pretty well in its own compartment, right? I mean, we're good. That everything has its place. The recitative, the scena, the active sections, the tempo di mezzo is that my phone? Sorry, because I was going to play some music for you. Excuse me. Oh, it's my mother calling. No, it's my phone. I don't even know why this is on. The verse structure in the recitative is mixed, irregular. We saw that. The rhyme scheme is unrhymed. There's no tonal center to that recitative. The rhythm and meter free, irregular. Just reviewing, there's quite a distinction between the recitative and the lyric music. Everything is kind of in its place. So, as we showed before, these are the aspects that separate each one, and particularly the separation was what was crucial. But Verdi was not so comfortable with this. He once wrote that if operas had no cavatinos, no duets, trios, choruses, finales, etc., if the entire opera were of one piece, I would find it more reasonable and right. So Verdi was looking to streamline, to create greater continuity, to eliminate all of these breaks in the operatic structure of the Rossini Code. And writing at the time, the great philosopher, poet, and political activist Giuseppe Manzini wrote that, complaining about operas, this should be 1854, not 1954, my bad, that the problem is that there's too many parts. It's a series of cavatinas, choruses, duets, trios, interrupted, not tied together by recitatives that no one listens to. Without unity, there can be no drama, no music. Art for art's sake, in other words, just to make the construction, is the supreme formula of Italian music. He thinks that's bad. From this has arisen all of its fault. Lack of unity, he uses unity again. Disconnection, interruptions. We can clearly see that with the structure that we've just seen. Lots of double bars within it. The secco recitative must get way to the dramatic accompanied recitative and so on. He talks about the cadenza, which is the cavaletta, is now used both monotonous and eternal. This goes on too long, and it's boring. Excessive embellishments. The overall work should have a unified concept, so much that it cannot be mutilated by cuts or substitutions. So, how does one, if one were to, and this is an example, this is Oberto, this is one of his earliest operas. And you'll notice that there are lots of breaks, and each break actually was published in a separate volume by Ricordi, because singers could then only, if you only wanted to buy the Scena Duetto, you could just order 119A2. And so, in other words, that's how broken up it was. They would break up each one. This is, 1840 for Oberto. But by the time of Verdi's last opera, Falstaff, this is what the title page looked like. First part, second part, basta. No more choruses, no more finales, no more cavatinas. It was, 134 pages of music without a break. Without a break. So it's clearly Verdi was doing something to break the Rossini Code. And this is what I think is really interesting and quite cool. He's trying to achieve structural unity, remember Manzini, and formal cohesion. Eliminate the strict economy of action and reflection, because, we're not, unless we're schizophrenic, we become angry, right? Don't we? We sort of become angry and we calm down. We don't all of a sudden have, change our moods immediately. Some of us do from time to time, but a more naturalistic emotional variety of that included transitions. And this was also because of, at this time, really good translations of works by Byron, by Shakespeare, were becoming available to the Italian public. So this totally new type of literature, romanticism, romantic literature, that was very bold and very dramatic, but yet was not quite so segmented, was very much decomposed. And of course, Verdi, we know, wrote Macbeth and Othello and loved Shakespeare. The text had a greater, over the course of Verdi's career, developed a much freer interplay between rhymed text and unrhymed text. There was great freedom of the verse. By the time we got to his final librettists, the strict delineation of recitext and lyrical text had been eliminated. And this is what I think is most interesting. Even in the early works, I'm going to show you in a second, the lyric music begins to accompany recitative text. In other words, he'll say that this text is so beautiful, it should have some lyric music, even though it's not in a quatrain, even though it's not in 8 syllables with a rhyme stream. And sometimes lyric text, that is rhyme-schemed text, he wrote recitative texture to it. So breaking these boundaries, breaking away from the strict associations that are there. And most importantly, I think, elimination of the section closure points. In other words, no double bars specifically tied to these things. Overlapping of the elements. In other words, things don't get lined up the way they're supposed to get lined up. Lyric music accompanying recitative, we talked about that in recitative accompanying. And so let's just see here. One of the things about this aria that we just saw, we see the purple prose sections for the cantabile, right? And we have the tempo di mezzo, and then the cabaletta. But what's weird is this section up here. Here's the guard says in recitative, wait here until the council calls you again. Yes, embrace, let me feel again, let me breathe the air that is not so dismal with groans and sighs. He's in prison. And he looks out the window and he has a fantasy. He looks out the window, and this is sort of my dissertation text or title is that in a lot of the recitatives in these early Verdi operas, Verdi will recognize a displacement, a temporal displacement, a psychological displacement. In other words, the singer goes somewhere inside of his head. He looks out the sky and says, "Breeze of my native fly, I fly to kiss the face of an innocent man," asking the native soil to embrace him. "Behold my Venice, behold her sea, queen of the waves, I salute you." So Verdi saw this section, and lo and behold, we have the beginning of the piece here. It's recitative texture. The guard says, "Please here, wait here for a while until they call you in." And oh yes, I can feel again. I can breathe. I can breathe once again. My name's up. And then here we start an adagio with a 2-bar introduction. Now it's interesting. It was preceded by a pretty strong cadential 6/4/5/7 chord, very strong B flat major. So are we in the cantabile now? What was the audience thinking? We're certainly there psychologically, because he begins now to talk about, oh my goodness, a 4-bar introduction band. He begins to talk about the breezes of he wants to be kissed by the native soil. This lyrical fantasy takes place right smack dab in the middle of the recitative. So this is breaking the rules. Bad Verdi, bad boy, right? It's a modulating section, I think. Yes, he moves from B flat to F major, and boom, 164, big nice cadence, boom, F major. And then he goes back to recitative texture. So this was an example of prose set to music poetry. Prose made poetic. And of course, it's not until here that we actually get to the cantabile. So, I mean, is he trying to fake out the audiences? Is he trying to say, "Ha ha, I teased you with a little bit of lyricism"? No, I think he recognized dramatically that this is a fantasy taking place, and it should be set lyrically, even though the librettist did not set it in really structured text. Here's a little section from Oberto. This is Oberto's father who's coming back to chastise his daughter for something that she's about to do. But he too is traveling at night, and he realizes he's back across the border to meet with his daughter in the dark of night. And same thing here. Within this very mixed verse thing, and it's called versi sciolti, changed verse. He has the idea of, "With new tears I come to bathe in you, O sweet native land. Afterwards I must say to you one more time, farewell." And the recitative goes along with a nice orchestral introduction. All the solo singing, no real tempo set to it. There's very little accompaniment. Here's a little bit more of the orchestral stuff. And he has a perfect authentic cadence, half cadence in G minor, right? And he begins andante in G minor. Well, this is mixed verse, but it's set in the most lyrical of ways. I mean, look, there's a regulated pulse, a regulated accompaniment texture, even big, repeated sort of phrase sections here. Everything that you would expect from a regular aria, but boom, it ends here. Back to recitative, even writes that here. Big cadential 6/4/5/3, and not to. Yes, so this would be modulating to D minor. Yes, but he doesn't go to D minor. It's 6/4/5/3, but then back to the B flat here. So, and the continuation with more recitative. So once again, it is this recit goes on for quite a long time. So once again, it is the interpolation of lyrical music over mixed verse. So as it goes on, the next thing he does that's very interesting is here we have the first two stanzas of the the lyric section. So, guardami sul mio ciglio, vedi del duole in fronte, again 8, nell'impudica fronte, sputi il terror ti sta. So it is, once again, there's like 7s and 8. Non ti basto il periglio, d'un padre sventurato, 7 again, l'onore tu macchiato, 7, di sua cadente età. So this is actually setenary, which is kind of unusual, but it's all 7 syllable. But you can see the rhyme scheme is the same, and so this should be the beginning of the lyric music, right? It should correspond if you're going to abide by the code. But yet you'll see that what he does is he puts the first entire stanza in recitative texture, and he doesn't get to the lyric until the second one. He delays it. So we have this allegro, and he has this weird sort of chorale stuff going on here, a fermata. This is all con la parte, right? This would all be nell'impudica fronte. In other words, it's accompanied recitative. Scuti il terror ti sta. Fermata, double bar, moderato, new key, second stanza. So why would he do that, you know? Why can't he just follow the rules? Such a shame. Anyway, then this turns out into a beautiful, beautiful lyric section here. Continues on. Here's another one. This is also from Oberto. Sogno stesso a te davanti, vedi una donna infelice, se pietà sperar melice, io la spero dal tuo cor. And clearly, 2 quatrains of rhyming regular verbs. But you'll see what he does is the same sort of thing. Sogno stesso. It's a big fermata, wait. A te davanti. So, what key are we in? We're sort of, we should be in D major, right? Okay, here's the big D major chord. A te davanti. Okay, 5, 6. Then he goes to F sharp minor. But you're not supposed to do a big cadence in F sharp minor if you're writing lyrical music, right? He also has this broken up thing. There's a fermata there. It kind of gets started, and then it goes left when it should go right, and then it cadences in F sharp minor. And then you have, beginning here, an orchestral introduction. Then the second stanza, he puts in perfectly normal lyric writing. So the first stanza should have been lyric again, but he decided that it was better, more dramatic, to place it in the recitative texture with all of the variegated aspects, that includes. So once again, achieving structural unity by breaking the boundaries, eliminating the strict economy of action and reflection, particularly here, lyric music accompanying recitative texture accompanying lyric. Elimination of disclosure points, overlapping of elements in particular, things that should line up but don't line up. And this is for the purpose of creating that structural unity and formal cohesion. And here is Lombardi, as we saw before, with, goodness, 25 separate things. And going back once again, Falstaff, just one. And the other thing that Verdi did, which is not really a part of my discussion here, is that he would do the same thing over those bridges between numbers. So it became pointless to call this a prelude coro d'introduzione, scena, quintetto dell'introduzione. I mean, they became kind of pointless because there were no breaks in between the numbers. And this pissed off a lot of people, particularly the singers, because they wanted to have their moments for applauses, right? They wanted to have the breaks in between the pieces to show off their music. So elimination of cavalettas, the putting things together, combining them all, and then you have something like this in Falstaff, which is really incredible. And Giuseppe Manzini talking about unity and talking about combining things. And does anybody know anything about Giuseppe Manzini? He was a great friend of Verdi's. Verdi was a great supporter of his. He was known as the beating soul of Italy. Because in 1840, when we wrote Oberto, Italy consisted of like 20 million countries, right? They were all owned by somebody else. The Kingdom of Sardinia, Lombardy, Venezia, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different countries. Between the time of Oberto and the time of Falstaff was the time in which Garibaldi and Manzini marched through Italy and combined it all into one. So it's just an interesting take. You see what is reflected in music going on in politics, going on at the same time. And also, I akin it to the emergence of music. If you think of it, the difference between the symphony and the Alpine Symphony, you know, the Beethoven Symphony No. 5 and the Alpine Symphony, which is one long suite. The emergence of the symphonic poem, Franz Liszt, really the revolutions in structure that were taking place in the symphonic music world, where everything, you know, had the exposition, the development, the recapitulation, second movement is a rondo, or, you know, it's a dance form, and so on. This compartmentalization, where then you begin to see the emergence of the symphonic poem in symphony music. Also in opera, right next door to Italy, Wagner was doing pretty weird things as well at the time. Very similar, sewing together things, breaking down all the barriers. But what I find most interesting is Manzini's talking in Verdi's ear and say, hey, you should really break this code, because we can have an entirely unified operatic language. And Verdi saying, yes, if there were no cavatinas and trios and so on, it would be better if it was all one. So it's a philosophical aspect, I think, that Verdi saw with his friend Manzini that created, you know, the difference between this and this, and the difference between this and that. So all put together. There are many more things to talk about, but that's it for my slideshow today and my presentation. It's the first musicology class that didn't have any actual music in it. So, but we have time for about 6 minutes for questions. Is that right?
Sure.
Any questions? Really? Was it comprehensible? Yes.
Do you have anything on your phone other than your mother that you want to say?
Yes. Yes. You want to listen to some music? We have time to do that. Yeah.
It goes till 10 till, so you can go down.
Oh, I don't know if this.
This isn't Music Minus One where you sing over it, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Just want to be sure.
See which one I've got here. Okay, this is on you. This work here. Play.
I have a question actually. Did the unification of Germany have a similar effect on the opera tradition in Germany? Because I know they were both about the same time, and both of the changes were happening at the same time.
Well, which unification of Germany? Not the most.
When Prussia, you know.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I don't know. What's interesting is that Wagner was very much involved in that Prussian War, and he ended up on the wrong side of it, as you may know, and he had to hightail it to Venice, which is, you know, Verdi's country, and oh, good, here we go. Something's happening.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, so Wagner was just on the other side, whereas Verdi in Italy was on the right side, I guess.
Okay, let's see if I can get this one up. This is, you know, I didn't actually use this one. Hold on. Oh, do I? How embarrassing. I don't have anything that. I didn't think I was actually going to have time for this. We can just listen to music if you want. And I don't have enough internet in order to get it, because that's the problem, is all the things that I have are coming through online. there is no signal down here. So that's my problem. Are you familiar with that situation?
Yeah.
That's okay.
My mistake. Anyway, other questions? Anybody? Is anybody interested in opera in here? You get to play much opera?
You get a watch out of
That's about it.
From what? Like videos and stuff like that?
Oh, there's a
Program, good.
Yeah.
And
they'll ask the musicians like but it's not. I don't think.
They usually do. Oh, sorry.
Wasn't the last like full orchestra opera Madame Butterfly?
wow.
I think it was Pirates of Penzance.
Okay, great.
But I mean,
That's not really.
What they did this year?
Strictly speaking. Many different yes.
Yeah.
It's not for a violist. It's like the words. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just jealous. But Butterfly is great stuff.
Yeah.
And you see Puccini. I mean, it's the same thing. If you look at an act of Butterfly, it's just one straight thing. So, I mean, there's the humming chorus and things like that that are indicated in the index, but it's very much three composed. It doesn't have quite the sensibility. Yes.
How did audiences receive this change initially? Were they
You know, interesting.
on board or?
Yes. Well, the early operas until Nabucco, which is only his third opera, it was really with Nabucco that he made this splash. That had so much intense emotional drama that people overlooked very much the departures from convenzione. And actually, Nabucco was a fairly conventional opera, more so even than Oberto, in which you find a few of these interesting overlaps. And interesting, I mean, there are some scholars that have called this rough edges of construction, that do sort of mistakes in Verdi's, and I don't think so. I think this is the early attempts to break away from that convention to create the overlapping things. But Oberto was not a big hit. Nabucco was very much. Lombardi was very much. The Due Foscari was not. So I find the ones that are actually that have the most breaks from convention are the ones that are least that were least appreciated at the time. And just going back to this aspect of the unification of Italy, one of the things that Verdi was very much noted for was creating music that spoke to the Italian soul. I mean, this is a country that was being dominated by the Austrians, by the French, by Napoleon. There was really the papal states. There was, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. He was able to find in his choral writing and in the subject matter and in the way that he executed the operas, really the soul of what Italy stood for, about being oppressed, about rising up, about people doing good things. These are conventional opera, idioms, but Verdi was to do it in song in a way that was quite incredible. I had the opportunity to go to Verona. Does anybody know where Verona is in Italy? So the Arena di Verona is this giant old Roman Colosseum, and it's like where they, bulls and not bulls, but people got eaten, or gladiators and things like that. But now it is an incredible outside operatic amphitheater. And you go there, you buy a ticket, you sit on the stone, and there's the guys going popcorn, peanuts, the Coca-Cola, walking up and down like a baseball game. And the performances are amazing. They have, Domingo and Pavarotti and everything. And people sing as loud as they can during the choruses. They'll just dabble it, they just sing right along. So, if you go to hear, some of these great Verdi operas, they don't care. They just sing right along with it. And it's beautiful things. Amazing stars are out, and you have a glass of Chianti in your hand, and it's a great way to watch opera. But it's
he went out a huge success.
What's that?
He went out a huge success.
Yes, and so did Rossini. I mean, Rossini was like Michael Jackson. He couldn't walk through Paris streets without people ripping parts of his clothes off and trying to get things. They were. He was really. It was very much the same as a rock star. And Verdi was, as well. He had to be brought out of retirement for Aida, which is a genius piece of work. And then Turning to Falstaff, Turning to Shakespeare, the comic operas is very last. The only other comic opera he wrote was his second opera, and it was a total flop. But Falstaff was a work of genius. Good, thank you. Thank you very much.
There will be talk time down here beginning at 4 o'clock. If you have not picked up an evaluation form for Mr. Radcliffe, please do so. And you know the drill where to put it.
And if you'd like me to fill out any of your evaluation forms, just let me know. Thank you.
Dude, I've never taken the most history class ever. I've taken one year. Well, I didn't do any of that at all. What's my new share? What?
The thing is, what I break on this.
Thanks for your help. I'm sorry you went and got that thing and I ended up not going.
So that's why. So I did. It's like exactly. Yeah. This is in the morning. I didn't need a
Yep.
Yeah.
You're wearing your summer black. It's still cold, right?
Yeah, it's really cold outside. It's not
Cool. Comfortably cool.
Is
that all right?
Didn't mean to push you on.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
With the iPod, I just wanted to get it.
Yeah.
But you're right, we have an Ethernet cable in here because you can't get.
Is that right? Yeah. On oversight, it's supposed to be wirelessly activated. I didn't realize that I should be.
Oh, here it is.
Live streaming.
Yeah.
I use Rhapsody because I don't have any more room in my life for.
There it is, yeah. You put more stuff in your hard drive, yeah.
I mean,
Or
I
I do
use
the same thing, yeah.
And, just, some people do Naxos and Music Library, but I like Rhapsody, I don't know, but.
We subscribe to Naxos here, that's what
Yeah.
I've been using just because it's thoughtless, I mean, I just know where to find it.
Yeah. And you find it,
That's all I'm trying, I haven't read Rhapsody yet, sorry. I need.
Rhapsody, I mean, if I were to have a Naxos thing, I think the recording's quality is better.
Really?
Yeah, I think they have better stuff.
Oh, yeah, better source material?
Yeah, I think, Rhapsody tends to have like the greatest Tchaikovsky love melody types of stuff. And you pick through it, and then you can find Baccarat and something, but it's only because some clever executive
Yeah.
put that together with, the Volcanians.
Yeah.